everyone. Welcome to the Women Leading on Climate podcast, where we share the microphone with awesome women that inspire me and hopefully inspire a whole bunch of women who know them and are learning about them. So today is a very special day. I am joined by Gina McCarthy. She is so amazing. She is someone I've totally looked up to. I've learned so much from. And she inspires me and so many other women. She is tough. She is smart. She's no BS. And she's also really funny. And this accent of hers, the Boston accent's a killer. So let me talk a bit about Gina before she and I have a conversation. So I met Gina when I was a new minister. Like I got named to cabinet. I go to the U.S. And I meet this woman, Gina McCarthy, and I know not a lot. I had done the Paris Agreement negotiations, but I'd heard like Gina's a legend. And I meet her and we have this great conversation and we totally get along. And I'm like, this is going to be awesome. We have some time, runway into the next U.S. election. We can do lots of awesome things together. She was head of the EPA then, so she'd been working hard on climate, well, for decades, but at this point, as head of the EPA under the Obama administration. And what was cool is that immediately there was a decision to have, Trudeau was invited by Obama to do to a state visit. But what Gina and I concocted was like, we're going to get action on climate through a bilateral deal, which is very good because it means then at least in Canada, it meant that I could tell provinces, well, we agreed on methane with the US, so I guess we got to go forward with it. So it was really helpful and we worked really hard on that, which was really amazing. And then, of course, sadly, she left the scene pretty quick because Trump 1 came in and she went and did a bunch of things, hopefully made a little bit of money, but was still working hard on climate. And then I think she was just going on her merry way, doing her things on climate. And then Biden got elected, President Biden. And then he phoned her up and he said, okay, Gina, I need you back. She can talk a bit about more of the story, but I think it was then that Gina was like, okay, and she became the climate czar. That's what we call Gina, the climate czar, from the White House, overseeing all climate policy, which is great, having someone the center. And of course, she did a bunch of different things, but got through the Inflation Reduction Act, which really has driven so much of climate action in the United States, proving that the economy and the environment go hand in hand. But of course, it hasn't been easy. She's had to face Trump twice. Trying to roll back all the amazing work that she and the different administrations she's in has done. And she's still positive. She is like, we are just going to do this. And so I just am so happy to have you, Gina. It's great to see you.
Catherine, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for the lengthy introduction. But I have to say that I am not a climate czar. I'm a climate czarina. I mean, we are
nice.
a women's group.
Right.
So we should be careful about what our titles are. But it is great to be here with you, Catherine. And thanks for the introduction. It just makes me feel old as the hills, which actually I am. So I guess it feels just about right.
Okay, so let's start. I'm not going to go into policy at the start. I'm just going to say, like, how you doing? Like, it's really tough right now. I feel like, okay, after Trump won, it was hard, but we're just going to survive this 4 years and we're going to move forward. And we saw cities and regions and businesses step up. But now we're in Trump 2, and like, this is really different. One, I think we were like, okay, we'll survive this. We weren't expecting that we would have a second Trump administration, but clearly the administration, I think Project 2025, whatever anyone thought, they are now absolutely implementing it and they're rolling back a lot of your work. So let's not talk about the substance, but like right now, how are you feeling? Like, I know, like, I find it really tough.
To be really honest, it is challenging. I feel like I'm on a little bit of a roller coaster. But this administration is, I think, honestly, unlike any that I've ever seen. I've been around a while. I remember, when Nixon actually moved forward finally sort of recognized climate and issues beyond that. I mean, at least we weren't denying the need to take action on health and the environment. And he started the EPA, and over time, climate became, basically such an understandable risk that people needed to act on it, and through all those histories, the Bush administration, and I mean, all of them, it had a feel where, not everybody was aligned. Republicans had different views on issues than Democrats did, but it never felt like it feels now, which is that there is no sense of unity at all. It is all just one-sided Republican nonsense, honestly. And President Trump is just about, the worst leader that I think our country has ever seen. He's leading us in the absolute wrong direction at the very moment in time when our world needs us to act together. And so for me, it's just really disrupting, not just how I think about the world today, but the problem is envisioning that future right now is very hard because the United States is such a big player. We are such a big emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, like number 2, and I think we fight to be number 1. Do you know what I mean? That's what it feels like now. And so it's pretty disturbing. But honestly, Catherine, I think both of us worry about this stuff, but at the same time, we've got families, we've got lives. We have to think about a balance here so that we won't drive ourselves crazy. And instead, hopefully, just drive this administration crazy by pointing out all the nonsense and the lack of justification and the illegalities. These are all just, it's a difficult time, but I like you said, we can't let it take away our sense of optimism and hope. And I'm not going to let it do that no matter what.
So I totally hear you on that. I mean, it is hard. And like we're looking at wildfires across Canada, like that are, meaning evacuations of communities. And it's not just remote communities, which is always terrible. It's often Indigenous communities. But now it's like, major cities like Halifax and St. John's. So but you got to keep on going. So that's why also this podcast I think is important because, we're just realists, you and I, optimistic realists or realistic optimists, depends on the day. But so, okay, let's go to a different time. Let's go to a happier time. So I talked a bit about the amazing state visit where I was working with you on, landing some real elements of the climate and Arctic bilateral deal. Well, when someone told me I had to worry about my dress like a week before, they're like, "Are you wearing a Canadian designer?" I was like, "What? I got a dress on sale that I was planning on wearing to the state dinner." They're like, "Whoa, that is bad." I think it was my sister too. She's like, "Get it together." I was like, "Get it together." I'm just trying to get it together in
Only
climate.
relatives can do stuff like that. So it must.
I don't know. She's just like, "Okay, you know what? You can find something, I'm sure." So anyway, I got this great dress in the end, which I laughed. No one cared. It was very, very expensive. No one asked me who the Canadian designer was, but at least I had a good dress, and we got a climate deal. But for me, that was more important. But
I think I will admit that out of the 8 years I managed to be in the White House, I don't think I ever wore a dress except to like the fancy ball things we used to have, like a big state dinner with Japan. Yeah. That was it. And I went to the cheapest places ever to purchase one. Because number one, you don't make any money when you work in the federal government. But the other reason was I knew I'd never wear it again.
Yeah, no, I haven't worn the red dress again.
Right now, I'm sitting here with this really nice shirt because I thought I had a nice color. And underneath it are my black shorts.
Totally.
With my sneakers. So.
That is kind of the good thing when we kind of do these Zoom and, videos. No one knows what we're wearing underneath. Okay, so that was a great time. It was actually quite a short time, But I think it's important to talk about what we were able to achieve, and it really, I'm really like, I was new, and so I was like, okay, I'll just like with the U.S. we're gonna work with them. What do they want to do? Because you guys had really had an agenda, and I think one of the coolest things that I was able to help with, although you were certainly driving it with John Kerry, and President Obama too, which was the amendment to the Montreal Protocol, the Kigali Amendment. So maybe you could talk a bit about that, and then we can talk about our little story, because we do have Gina and I have many funny stories. So I think people will have a good laugh, because you have to do serious stuff, but you also have to have a little bit of a good time.
Well, one of the fun things, Catherine, about doing work with you is that, I think it really brought the U.S. and China together. I'm sorry, Canada.
I was going to say we did that. I
Not
don't know
China.
that we did it.
The U.S. and Canada together. It was just an amazing time, I think, when we were able really to break barriers in some of these discussions, because neither you or I have a lot of patience for things that are distractive. Do you know what I mean? So when we went to the efforts to look at how we could address the Kigali Amendment and really get over the finish line, it was hugely important, and nobody really knows much about it.
Maybe
The
you could
amendment.
explain, because some people listening, they may not know the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment. What were we trying to do?
Well, the Montreal Protocol was basically, essentially, how do we address the hydrofluorocarbons that are going into the atmosphere, which are hugely global warming. And nobody hears about that or talks about it. But it's an order of magnitude above what people think of as a methane or something. They're extremely important. And so it's an international agreement that looked at how do we begin to cap and reduce the emissions of HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, which are highly global warming. And it's an international discussion. In other words, in order to get anything over the finish line, every country is involved, and every country needs to say yes. Okay? Which is crazy, I know, but that was it. And both you and I were representing our individual countries in those efforts, and it was both exhausting but also incredibly gratifying. Because for some reason, we had an international discussion that wasn't about the individual nations' picky issues. It was about the world. It was about the climate. It was about how we work together. And so it was an amazing thing, because we ended up virtually, after, I think, locking ourselves in rooms for about 3 or 4 days, we finally, after many international discussions on this, ended up right before the end of the Obama administration actually getting a full international agreement to move forward with the Kigali Amendment. And I think it was about huge amounts of genuine discussion. But it also had a lot of, I think, personalities involved. We simply got along. We were locked in rooms so long that you knew everybody's kids' names and whether they had grandchildren, what they were doing and who they were doing. And it became an enormously personal and productive way to actually conduct an international discussion that was so critically important. And we did it I actually think we did it because we cared about each other. In the end, it was, frankly, I think, as you know, and I know, it was a lot of women in the back, in working together. But it was a lot of real opportunity, I think, for an international agreement to shine. And it's been historically important since then.
So let's talk about, sometimes it's not always the most fun in negotiations. I know, surprise, everyone's surprised at like 3 a.m. when you've been hanging out in a room. And while there were many women behind the scenes, sometimes there were not that many women in the room. I remember this crowded, sweaty, dark room. And I'm sitting there beside you and I'm like, I'm dying. I'm dying. Like, we have been going around in circles. No one is actually negotiating. They have a bottom line and we need to make some progress here because we're running out of time. So you and I are like kind of losing our minds and being quite frank, probably. And then I said, I got an idea. I don't know why I just got this idea, but I think I was just like hungry and tired and jet lagged because we were in Vienna and in this little room and it was very late. And so I opened my bag and I had this, someone had given me a box of chocolates. And I said, I'm going to go around and tell people that they can get a chocolate if they actually start negotiating. And you're like, do it, do it. So what kind of chocolates? You remembered, I think. What kind of
Clusters.
chocolates?
They were called the chocolate clusters.
Okay, so I think it was very particular. Like people like chocolate clusters, I think. Like they're good. They're not
Yeah.
kind of the crappy box of chocolates. We got to look and figure out what flavor, and most of the time you don't like it. So the chocolate clusters. And I remember going, I can't remember, was it Pakistan, the Pakistani negotiator, or who knows. I started going around the room and I said, okay, you get a chocolate if you actually start negotiating because it's 3 a.m., folks. Like, we got to go to bed. And I remember someone took it. They're like, fine. They took the chocolate. No, I said, you got to put your offer on the table. And then they put it down. I was like, great, here you go. And then I think we stayed for a little bit longer because now people were starting to get going. And then we're like, okay, out. Let's get out. I am tired. Let's get a drink. And of course, nothing is open because it's 3 a.m. in Vienna and like in the middle of who knows where we're negotiating. So luckily, I think it was someone on my team. Thank you, my team. Often a lot of women on my team. They're like, okay, we're going to find, I don't know, they found a bottle of wine. You and I sat in someone else's delegation office. And we just found the closest room. And we had a drink and a laugh. And I think that's also really important. And I do think it's like a lesson I've learned, and so maybe other people can maybe benefit. I think, look, this is life and death, and this working on climate is so critically important, and it's so hard and often super annoying and frustrating. But you also have to have some perspective and you have to have some fun because I don't think you can survive it if you don't have a laugh and you don't have friends and you don't sometimes just talk about your kids or grandkids or what you're hoping to do or just chill. And that was a really great moment because I really felt, okay, we're not getting more out of these negotiations, but I'd really like to hang out with my friend Gina because we only see each other often on business stuff. So that was great. That was great. Lesson to anyone, like go have some fun too with your awesome women climate friends.
Well, I think I think the only way sometimes to get through the politics of this stuff, which, everybody goes into these meetings with sort of an assigned outcome. This is what you should do. And I think many of the countries come in with wanting very limited action moving forward. Some do, some don't want anything to happen.
Yep.
Others, like, Canada and the US, want to keep plowing forward, getting stuff done. And the only way you can reduce the politics around it is to become much more personally acquainted with the people that you're sitting with, where you begin to recognize, where you say, aha, that person can't tolerate that because I can tell from the look on their face that they've already been told, no, don't go down that road. You know what I mean? So you have to get the clues from other people around you. And you only do that if you really start caring about each other. If it's not just the outcome, but it's how to get there. And
100%.
That's, I think, what you and I played off with each other. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean it in all the best. We got to know people. We got to say, okay, if you can't do that, I get it. Or can you call and see if this will work just as well? Let's take a 10-minute break. Make that call. Come back. Because we weren't trying to mess anybody up. We were trying to get as much good stuff as we could. And I think, when I look back, the craziness of some of it, the meeting we had in Kigali in Rwanda, where it finally wrapped up, was intense because neither China nor no, not was it just China? It was China and India. Neither of them were really thinking that they'd go in there with an outcome.
Hmm.
And we were thinking we got to get China and India on board.
Yeah.
And we ended up, having to chase people around to make sure that they didn't leave early or sneak out of the building before we could actually get to a final decision and a final vote. And if I remember correctly, the final vote was at something like we had done 24 hour after 24 hour, and it came at like 7:30 in the morning when the final vote was cast. And I looked over, and all of the UN folks from the ozone contingency was sound asleep with their heads like this down on the because they were exhausted. And you and I were
Uh,
standing up, walking the aisles, making sure everybody knew what they were voting on, and we're getting excited. So none of the things in government really are straightforward.
no.
And you can handle it in a couple of ways by being an authoritarian, demanding, or the way you and I do business, which is you talk about human needs. You talk
Hmm.
about what it's going to do for climate and how it's going to help our ability to have water and food for people. You personalize it, and then you act like a person to talk
Hmm.
about it and deliver it. And I think many of those things are unique traits that women have figured out how to utilize. Because don't you do the same thing with your kids? You love them
Totally.
dearly. Sometimes you have to tell them what's what, but you have to figure out how to make a deal, whether it's in your family or a big kid's family. And I think we've all learned to do that. We've learned what works, what doesn't, and it's not disingenuous. When we help to get people to think about what's the best outcome, it is perfectly done in a way that doesn't degrade them, but is simply about information and understanding. And I loved those discussions for that very reason. We had a great time,
We had a great
trying to
time.
figure out how to make things work for everybody. And it's worked for everybody.
100%. I know they told me I had to stay like this to my microphone, so I'm trying not to move, which is very unusual to me. So we just we'll just try to like I guess it's just back and forth. Okay. So Gina, we now have to get off of like the good times. Trump one happens, and let me just tell you how sad it was for me. So I head over to the EPA. Now I had been like, it was like I was under witness protection. They were like, you can't send Catherine over with the Trump administration because they really don't like climate. And I was like, okay, I just have to go talk to this guy. We now had a new head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt. And let me tell you, I wasn't like super psyched, but I was like, okay, I got to bring him on side. I got to bring him on side. So like I studied him and I read up, and you like you and I do like, okay, what is he like? Like, what are the things that he likes? We already know he doesn't really believe in climate change and whatever, but I knew he liked baseball. And of course, I thought he liked jobs in the economy. So those were my pitches, literally pitches. So I go to the EPA building, which is a very big, imposing building, and I'm walking the hallways, and it's actually really sad. I mean, I think it's probably sadder today, but like there are boxes in the hallway because people have lost jobs. And people are leaving, and people just looked at like it was terrible going in. I always loved going to see you, but I was like, oh God, it feels heavy. And I go in. And I meet Secretary Pruitt's assistant. And then she says, okay, you can come in and meet him. And I think I'm probably the first international visitor he's had on climate. And so I think, oh, he must be like kind of interested to have an international visit. Like Canadians, everyone loves Canadians. So I go in and we sit down. And I'm like I'm digging deep. I'm really digging deep, Gina. I'm like baseball. Like I don't really love baseball. I'm just going to put it out there. But I'm like baseball, Blue Jays, like pulling up like, whatever I can on the baseball front. And he's not really engaging. So that's kind of annoying. Then I move on to like, okay, well, I know you guys care about jobs and the economy. So the Paris Agreement, because at this point it's very dicey. It's like a reality. It's a reality game, like game where like, will the U.S. stay in the Paris Agreement or not at this point? So like, people are going to Ivanka, like maybe Ivanka will keep us in. And I'm like, well, I'll try to do my part with this guy. I'll try to talk about jobs and economy. It's good for the US because you have all these solutions. You're going to make a lot of money and that. So I try all that. And it's like literally like talking to like a wall. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I'm really trying. You could just even try to have a conversation. So anyway, I leave and I'm like, that was bizarre. So I've got Marlo, my chief of staff, and I'm okay, to be honest, a little pissed off. So I say to Marlo, like, what the heck was going on there? And Marlo starts laughing. He's like, didn't you see? I was like, what do you mean, didn't I see? She said, didn't you see like above your head? He had the TV on and silent watching March Madness. I was like, for the love of God. Like, for the love of God. Seriously. Anyway, I outlasted him. He didn't last all that long, we'll say, but that's kind of what was going on. Like it was actually, to be honest, a bit representative of like kind of the amateur hour aspects. So the good news, I think, was in those 4 years, it was like really tough because the US was not engaging and pulled out of the Paris, or saying it was pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Good news, your negotiators, I think, made it happen that they could only really pull out on the date of the next election. So it was all, but anyway, we kept it together. But it was like, it was really tough. But maybe during that period, as you were observing, like, you were probably thinking, okay, we got to survive this. That's what we were doing. But like, what did you learn then? Like watching, what was going on. Like, it must have been hard because you're out there and they're trying to, take down all these policies, backtrack, litigate. Do you
Yeah,
remember that time?
yeah, it was it was a difficult time because it was very clear that we were not going to make any progress. In
Yeah.
4 years of lost progress on issues like climate change really matter, right? And so it was disappointing, but they were they were so dysfunctional.
Totally.
They went into that administration, I think, not realizing that they'd win, number one. And then they put people in that really had no business being in the administration. So in many ways, they tried hard to be disruptive, but it just ended up being boring. Do you know what I mean? It just,
I know, and you were very involved in the, I think, All In movement then. Like you were rounding, it was great because I was like, okay, round up the cities and regions,
that's
but
right.
also the businesses. Like they were very engaged. I remember, I think it was the CEO of Goldman Sachs, his first tweet was when the US said it was pulling out. Trump said that he was pulling out of the Paris Agreement. And I think that he tweeted and something to the effect about like, actually, it's important and we need to move forward on climate and we're still in. So that was good. You created
Yeah.
that whole movement.
Yeah. And states and cities really became the focal point. And, the same thing is obviously happening now.
Yeah.
Um, and so we definitely lost ground. I mean, the Clean Power Plan went down at that
Hmm.
point in time, which was really the first
Yeah.
big regulatory action that EPA could take to address climate change. And so and it became difficult with the Supreme Court at that point as
Yeah.
well. There were changes there. So it was difficult. but I also ended up being the president of and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council.
That's right.
So I
You were
not only
awesome.
sort of joined Bloomberg's America is All In to try to get states and cities active, but it was really fun for the first time for me to be at the head of an NGO that was as capable as that group. I mean, they
Yeah,
were
and they did a
amazing.
lot of great work during that
Yep.
time, and I actually felt like it was hard, but I felt like the administration was kind of bumbling. Although, as you say, like some like clean power plant, like some things they did were consequential, but at the flip side, it really galvanized others to do more. I was doing a lot with California and other places. But okay, I want to take a little break because here I just want to ask because I think it is important. Like, okay, climate action is tough. So I have to take breaks and like just do things that recenter me. That is swimming. Probably everyone is like, oh my God, in your social media, stop writing about how you go swim. I was like, no, actually, I like it because I like swimming. And there are other people who like swimming. I don't just have to be talking to climate people. So, generally, climate people actually like swimming in clean water. So there's good. There's a concentric circle around that. But what do you do, Gina? Like, what do you do when you want to just get away from it and clear your head?
For me, that's pretty easy. I go for walks in the woods. That's
Nice.
that's my that's
Hopefully, not woods that are burning,
my
sadly.
movement. Nope. And really, they're not massive hikes. I've been doing this since I was a little kid. We
Hmm.
lived right near Blue Hills, which was I think it's not a very big little mountain, but it's a great place, I and I've gone walking there with my dogs and stuff for my I can my whole life. Now I have a little
Awesome.
teeny dog, so she doesn't walk along with me. But now I'm in Jamaica Plain, which is a great area in the city of Boston. I have a pond to walk around that's a little short of a couple of miles. I got the Arboretum that's near me, which is about 5 mile hike for me. And I walk and I run and I walk and I look at things and sort of regroup. You can just take a deep breath again. And and when I was a little kid, if you took a deep breath even in the Blue Hills, you would be choking on all the pollution that was around at that point in time. So to me, every time I get to go out now, it's like a celebration.
Totally.
We've done so well in the years that I've been walking in the woods and I just love it. That it's the quiet and
Yeah.
the little you hear the rustling of the leaves and you hear the little tweets from the birds, and man, it just calms my nerves, because I think both you and I can get very hyper. Now I don't
What
mean
are
that in a
you
bad
talking
way.
about?
We're both like, anything bad, gonna get, and this is just our way.
I
I
love
think
it.
of calming the waters and giving us a sense of energy and optimism, because we need it.
That's great. So all the women out there and men who are listening, like get out to nature. Go for walks, go for swims. Okay, we're gonna dive back in. So, okay, we come back now. Good news. We're like, yay! We've got the Biden administration, and then I'm like, double yay! Gina McCarthy's come in, and you clearly learned some lessons because you were really hardcore as an administration when it came to climate. The Inflation Reduction Act, but I mean, you also are like people coming into the administration at all levels and like across portfolios needed to know about climate. So maybe talk about like what you learned. Like you're a strong woman, but just as someone who cared about climate, how did you guys approach this? Now you're with the Biden administration. You realize it's really consequential. Like you can lose elections and then you lose a lot. So how did you approach that? And like the IRA is part of it, but just when you guys were there, like getting stuff done.
I really hate saying IRA. I try to avoid it because
I
it
know,
sounds.
especially we're both Irish. Not good. Not good.
uh,
Inflation Reduction Act to everyone at home. No acronyms. Acronym free zone here.
yeah, there you go. And now that I've said that, I ended up getting a call from President Obama. You know, it when right after he was elected.
President Biden. Are we at Biden, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Take that back.
I mean, you got a lot of calls from a
Take
lot of
that back.
presidents, so you're lucky.
Well,
Like
I have chatted with President Obama since I left the administration, but I got a call from President Biden, and at the time I was president and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I was just like 10 months into it, maybe a little bit, maybe 11, and he asked if I would join as the White House National Climate Advisor, which is a new position in the White House. And what do you say? So I have to say yes. So the first thing I did was inform my husband, who had a heart attack, not literally, but basically I had just convinced him, since I was making money for the first time in my life as the CEO of NRDC, that he should get out of his work because of COVID and other things. It was not a good situation for him because he was out and about. And he did. And then like 2 weeks later, I have to go in and say, well, you know how I was making all that money?
I'm not going to do that
I'm
anymore.
not doing that anymore.
And guess what? I'm now going to be commuting to Washington and working all hours.
Exactly. And I don't know if people realize that, but commuting to Washington is on the person's payroll, not the government.
So even less money.
So I'm paying to go back and forth and stay on weekends, and I'm paying for an apartment, and I'm going, and the White House never pays big money for anything, but I had to go. I had to do it. And the thing that you'll appreciate this, I think, Catherine, the thing that I like the most about what we did to try to, basically move our country forward on clean energy while addressing the COVID challenges that continued, is we're all sitting around with masks on and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was awful. Even in the White House, you were masked up. You can't threaten the president by forgetting your mask, right? So it went on it felt like 9 months, 10 months. It was hideous.
Yeah.
Because you went home and all you had were these marks that outlined your face, But the thing I like best about it is it was the first time that I was ever able to work with basically the chief person in every branch of the administration, and get them to sit down around a table. And instead of having the number two or somebody with an expertise in something, we had everybody who was the best and the chief of every environmental agency to talk about how we would reshape the economy and move clean energy forward. It was an unbelievable opportunity. Because when, as the EPA person, I'm going to be able to tell Ernie Moniz and DOE what to do? No, I couldn't have done it. You know what I mean?
No.
They do what they want to do. Well, this was a chance for us to say, no, we're not acting like that anymore. The principal of every single agency, including the military, had to sit in those rooms and talk about how we were going to think differently about our future and about how we would move forward. That's how we did the Inflation Reduction Act. It was with the best and the brightest minds working together to figure out how we could make this thing work for the benefit of the people, for the benefit of our health, our economy, our jobs. All of that had to be part of it. And it was a wonderful experience, not an easy one, mind you, because not everybody wanted to be at that table as much as we needed them to be.
Yeah.
And eventually, when you had that leadership commitment, you could work with the teams at the agencies and really develop the guts of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's what happened. And really, Joe Biden was, instrumental in making sure that we were doing everything we could, and that he would come in and sit at the head of that table. He'd just pop in to the Roosevelt room, and he'd sit there, and for 2 hours, He'd be talking to the solar industry. He'd be talking to the power sector. We had everybody's input. And it was just a wonderful experience. And I think the Inflation Reduction Act, despite what folks might think today, it's still an amazing opportunity moving forward. We are still really pushing clean energy, despite even this administration. And so I'm proud of the work that we got done, but it was definitely a group effort, and it was definitely leadership from the top down that made that happen.
So, Gina, I want to talk about leadership because obviously this is about like women leading. When I watched that, like as you say, I was the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, much like you were the head of the EPA, and that's one person. But you need a whole team because, like, you regulating, like, I mean, like you, I was a regulator basically, and you're limited in your tools, and everyone's always like, this is negative, even if it's not, because regulation provides certainty to business. I'm not going to make the whole case for it, but you needed all these other players because the climate is an everything issue. But I watch your leadership because you need one, I think for anyone, there's going to be future prime ministers and presidents listening to this, I know. So it is really important if you're going to do climate that you have someone who oversees this whole thing. It cannot be, you can't put it all on your environment minister, EPA. It's like not going to work because it's an everything thing and other people can block it. And you certainly will have lobbyists and stakeholders who will say don't do things. So you need people to be strong, but you needed you at the center. Like, I'm really glad that Biden was able to convince you because you need someone who can cajole people. You need someone who can be funny, but who can be like very tough. Like if you have to be tough, it's not always fun to have those tough conversations, but you could do it. You need to figure out what's the angle and different things, but also you need to be able to talk like a real person and tell everyone that. Because I think your framing around climate was much broader. It was like about jobs. It was about the economy, but it was also about the environmental justice piece. It was also about improving people's lives, in particular, the most disadvantaged who are the most impacted by air quality, who are most impacted by poor water quality, by pollution. And I thought, you're a particular leader who brings so many skills to the table. I do think being a woman added to it because I do think, and I don't want to, sometimes people are like, okay, don't go take this too far, but I actually think women are often really practical and are outcomes focused. Like it's not about winning every argument. It's about winning an Inflation Reduction Act that can get through Congress and can get people on board. And I think it was really amazing to see your leadership, and I'm sure it was exhausting. I'm sure you're like, I could make a heck of a lot more money. Your poor husband, he's still with you, so that's good. And he's like, hopefully you spend a lot of time with him, give him back massages. I don't know what it takes, but it was really great, Gina. So I think that is a real lesson about how do you bring people together when it's hard, and how do you focus on outcomes that real people can understand and frame it in a particular way. And I just super want to give you kudos on that. And I hope all governments learn that if you really want to work on climate, it's got to be starting from the very top, the leader, but then you have to have someone who coordinates across departments who's very respected, but has the back of the leader so that you can always, the leader has their back so that you can always know that when you're sitting at the table, you can get done what you need to get done. So kudos to you.
Well, thanks, Catherine. I think those are, there's a bunch of skill sets that women need to have,
Yeah.
because you go in with a disadvantage even today,
Yep.
And so it's all about listening carefully. And you're right, forming a narrative that is understandable and appealable to people. When you're working in Washington, I can remember everybody talking about greenhouse gases, and I kept telling them, stop talking about greenhouse gases. Can you talk about health? Can you talk about jobs? I mean, the real things that people, I'm not saying you ignore the greenhouse gases, but you talk about it as just another effort that we've always done to protect people, right? When I was at EPA, it was about health and welfare. When I was in the White House, it still was. It was
Yep.
exactly the same thing, and it was speaking with integrity. It was recognizing, and being serious about what you thought you could do and what you knew you couldn't. And for me, much of the, at least the skills that I tried to grow was how to listen and what does it actually mean? What are they
No,
actually
totally.
telling me?
I think you were really, really amazing. Okay, so now we are where we are. We're in Trump too. I think like now people are like, people, women that I talk to, young women, senior women in government, in the private sector, in academia, and NGOs are wondering, what do we do? So, what is your advice at this critical period? Because it's critical. Like the world is on fire, and we're seeing a lot of backtracking from almost all governments. What is your advice? How are we moving forward?
Well, I think everybody knows that this administration is trying to trample over all of the laws and the rules and regulations, especially at EPA. That's one of their favorite chopping grounds, I guess you would say. Um, uh, the best advice that I can have, in addition to getting out and calming yourself every day, which I try to do every day, um, it's recognizing that we still have authorities in the United States. This is not it's a bad situation, but we have states with really good abilities to actually do laws and regulations. They can do that. They can fill some of the gap. We have cities that are doing exactly the same thing. And we're also continuing to fight against all of the illegal activities that are going on in this administration. And I think so for me, it's pretty familiar territory in terms of what you have to do. The unfamiliar part to me is that, this administration is not just anti-environment or anti-climate. It is anti-democracy.
Yeah.
That's the thing that keeps me awake. It's vastly different than what we saw in Trump 1. I didn't lose sleep over Trump 1. I got angry. We found a way to continue to move forward, and we did. It was not as disastrous by any means as to what we're seeing now, which is undermining the underpinnings of our democracy and doing it purposefully and doing it in a way which is, which is, as you mentioned, it is not just anti-democratic. It is. I don't know. I don't really know how to frame it, but they're going after the poorest communities.
Yeah.
They are focusing all of the bad stuff on Black communities, on communities of low income. And they're doing it purposefully. And they're giving money instead, taking it away from those who need it most and giving it to the multimillionaires
I know.
blatantly.
That
When
is
they
worrying.
fight
Yeah.
DEI, right? They are literally trying to make sure that Black kids can't get into colleges. That's literally what this is about.
That's the
I
thing I worry about. Like, I will say, I think they've scared people. And solidarity is really important. But now you feel like I do feel, and it's been good to see some marches. But I think, a lot of us from the international community looking in, we're like, get out on the streets. But I think that's what they want to do. They want to scare people. And we do need to, the fighting democracy, because democracy and climate are completely related, as we know. I just like saying to everyone out there in the US, just keep on going. Like solidarity, you have lots of people who support you internationally, but also in your own country, people still care about climate, but they care about each other. They care about equality. And I agree, it can't just be the richest win, because by the way, that's also often the richest polluters win.
Yeah.
So it's very related to climate. Okay, Gina, and as you said, I once did a video with you. You're like, to all the women are there, it's about our community, it's about our family, it's about our world. You go, girls. So from Gina,
Well,
you go, girls.
Catherine, I don't want to give anybody the impression that the fact that I am angry does not diminish in any way the opportunities that I see today. You know, all this stuff that he hates is happening, even wind and solar. Like 93% of the new electricity generation this decade is going to come from clean energy. So we have to survive this, but we cannot give up. We have every reason to be hopeful. We have lots of opportunities. And we're working really hard in states and cities to actually make those opportunities come to life. So there's no way the United States of America is going down to this person or this administration. True.
And you know what? We're good. We got to support women and, you know, everyone who's working on climate, but people like Yana Garcia in California, or all these mayors, often women, you know, folks in government. We got to stand up for women because it can be tough. So everyone go support the women working on climate in the United States. So Gina, if you were with me right now, I mean, it's a little early, so we wouldn't do it right now, but we might like have a glass of wine. I'd put on the music. And so I kind of like this isn't climate music. This is just like music. So I can always go to my past. So I'm like New Order or like, you know, different bands that I listen to. If I am putting on music, you got a glass of wine, putting on some music right now, what song do you want me to put on to get us going?
Well, it has to be the boss. It's got to be Bruce Springsteen, man. It's Dancing in the Dark.
Dancing in the Dark it is, Gina. You know what? We're going to end on Dancing in the Dark with Gina McCarthy, and everyone go dance. Thanks, Gina. You're the best.
Thanks, Catherine.